Okay, everyone, welcome back. You are not going to get this quality broadcasting from anywhere else, okay? That's how lucky you are. My first step is to find out if you can hear me. And if you can hear me, the second step is to find out if I play Jeremy boring, if you can hear Jeremy. So I'm going to wait for EJ and anyone else who is joining. And we're going to figure this out together. I'm telling you, you're not going to get this quality of content from anywhere else. Hi, EJ. So step one, can you hear me? Testing, testing, testing. Okay, you can hear me okay? So that's step one. Step two now is to go back to Jeremy Boring.
Last week, Tommy Robinson posted a video on X showing thousands of Shia Muslims gathered to observe Arba'in.
Okay, now I can hear Jeremy well. How about you?
Which falls 40 days after Ashura and closes the mourning period.
Okay, EJ. Mwah. Mwah. Thank you. So really, the headphones make the difference. You're awesome. Now, can you hear me well? Because now that I have these headphones, I don't know if I want to mess with anything, if it sounds okay. But, and by the way, again, it's up to my baby whether or not I can continue with this live stream. But thank you so much, EJ. You should be like a producer, honestly. But you shouldn't charge me for your help. And when I get a little bit bigger and can afford it, then I'll pay you. You want me to mute my mic while Jeremy plays because it's still getting the echo? I can do that. I'll have to. Okay, so when Jeremy plays, so you know what, EJ? I will work on that. There is no echo? Okay. I'll work on that. But right now, I think you're going to have to bear with the sounds. I'll try to keep it to a minimum, moving around and stuff while Jeremy plays. That would certainly be better. But if I was going for perfect and polished, I wouldn't be doing live right now and any second with my baby crying. So I think that this is survivable. Okay. Yeah, thank you, EJ. Yeah, I think because right now it says on my computer that the microphone is muted. So I think that the audio is coming from my phone mic, and so I can't mute that and then unmute it whenever I want to talk. So it's kind of, I'll just try to keep my background noise to a minimum because Jeremy has a lot of interesting stuff to say, but it's not going to be perfect. I'll work on it. Thank you, EJ. Thank you.
For Hussein ibn Ali, grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, killed at the Battle of Karbala in 680. The video shows hundreds of women and girls, some still infants, solemnly parading through the street in the traditional black abayas, the full-length, loosely flowing modesty robes common for women living in traditional Muslim cultures. The faces of the women and girls are covered by deep green veils symbolizing the family of Muhammad himself, and of course, black gloves, ensuring no skin is visible on any part of the body. It's a somber scene, a deeply religious scene. It's a scene straight out of the most traditional enclaves of Iraq or Lebanon. Only this video wasn't taken in Iraq or Lebanon, no. This video was taken right here in the good old US of A. Dearborn, Michigan to be exact, home of Henry Ford and of late, the highest concentration of Arab and Muslim residents of any city in America. In 2023, it became the first Arab-majority city anywhere in the country. Commentator Ali Beth Stuckey, responding to the video, observed, quote, "There are little girls and an infant wearing modesty garb in this video. If you just take the time to ask yourself why tiny children in this culture are forced to wear clothing meant to mitigate male lust, you might just see why importing Islam is a bad idea."
Now, personally, this is where I differ with a lot of conservatives, especially like really pro-Israel conservatives. I find that we need to find common ground with the moderate Muslims. I know that radical Islam presents a lot of problems, but if we, overgeneralize and kind of alienate all Muslims, you're going to insult a lot of people that are actually the most important allies against the radical Muslims. And so, anyways, this is not really the main topic that I wanted to discuss from Jeremy. I just wanted to point that out. I don't want anybody to think that I'm like a right-wing anti-Muslim person. I actually have Muslim friends and stuff, so it is a different culture as he gets into, but my point is I don't want to alienate all Muslims. There's 1.5 billion of them or something, and if we paint them all with the same color, I think that's wrong. So
a lot of bad ideas are being imported into America these days. In 2017, a journalist named Jafar Abdul Karim walked the streets of Amman, Jordan, and asked men a simple question. What would you do if your sister left home to find a job? Quote, "It wouldn't work, of course, because a woman shouldn't leave the house without a male chaperone," said one. Quote, "It is forbidden. It's about honor," said another. When asked by the reporter
Hi, Tribal Queen 905.
what he would do if his sister left and got a job anyway, the man's answer was chilling. Quote, "I would shoot her. I would do it. I would kill her," he said. When pressed by the reporter who gave him the right to murder his own sister, the man said, quote, "My father, my uncles, and my relatives. It's not wrong. It's our honor. It's our honor." The walls that once separated the West from the endless despair and injustice of third world thinking are starting to crumble, and not just the physical ones either. The physical ones are crumbling in plain sight. That's the Biden administration halting wall construction and bulldozing sections of border fence so that illegals could waltz into our country unopposed. It's the scenes from the Spanish town of Ceuta as migrants from Morocco triumphantly march through the streets, smashing stores, invading homes, and chanting Allahu Akbar. But the physical walls aren't the only ones that matter. I mean, they matter quite a lot, but they're not the only ones. It's the walls we can't see that are having a more corrosive effect on our country and on Western civilization than you probably realize. The walls of our minds, trained by thousands of years of Western thought and tradition, are also cracking. The backward thinking of depressed cultures is creeping in by immigration, yes, but by other means too. They're being carried to us by social media, beamed to us by...
Hi, Jujubee. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you for sticking with me through all the tech issues, and Eclectic Journalist helped me fix it, so we should all give a shout out to her. If you're not already subscribed to her, you definitely should. Not only does she do great work, but she helps other people like me get my act together. So I now have headphones and I can hear what's going on perfectly. Eclectic Journalist, I think, just said that she stepped away for a minute, but she's listening. So let's continue. Hi, Megan. Hi, Ex-Samurai.
Hostile foreign governments. It's invading the public square, it's invading our politics, and it's invading our way of seeing the world. There are really two distinct ways of seeing the world, two distinct worldviews that belong to two distinct cultures. Those worldviews are at war, and one of them is losing. In the West, we live in what cross-cultural researchers call a guilt-innocence culture. That means that we appeal to an objective moral code. We have rules that we endeavor to apply to everyone. We're a nation of laws, or at least we aspire to be, where justice is supposed to be blind. We care about the rights and behaviors of the individual, no matter their station. Outside the West, you have cultures researchers call honor-shame cultures. People in these cultures still exist as individuals, of course, and they're still bound by moral law. But the law is a bit more relational. Who you are, who your family is, what you owe your people, and where you stand in the social order all bear much more heavily on what justice requires. In this world, honoring your tribe is more important than pursuing justice. Saving face, preserving your social credit, and your good name are valued more highly than personal integrity or truth. On September 1st, a 4th District courtroom in Provo, Utah, will once again hear oral arguments to decide whether Tyler Robinson should be bound over to stand trial for the murder of Charlie Kirk. Over months of preparations leading to a preliminary hearing a few weeks ago, the prosecutors built their case the hard way, the agonizingly slow and methodical way, using facts and evidence, testimony from eyewitnesses, hours of security footage, forensic reports, DNA evidence, handwriting on shell casings, and a .30-06 rifle. Based on everything known publicly so far, this appears to be an open and shut case of a young man radicalized by a morally bankrupt leftist ideology committing violence against his political opposition.
This is what I want to hear from Jeremy. Yeah, I really like Jeremy Boring. Not so many people I could say I agree with almost 100%, but Jeremy is one of them. He's smart, he's articulate, and he's right about almost everything. And so I admire him. I like almost everything. I did have one disagreement with what he said at the beginning here, as I mentioned. But overall, he's as close to in perfect line with my personal views as anyone else.
Charlie Kirk believed his conservative ideology was so grounded in truth that he opened himself up to debate from anyone willing to stand up at a microphone.
Yeah, everyone that's saying hi to Eclectic Journalist, she's not ignoring you. She's just listening. She had to go do something. So I'll say hi on her behalf. Hi, Megan. Hi, X.
He engaged with his opponents freely, openly, and graciously. And that, in the estimation of many in the LGBTQ+ movement and the broader left-wing movement that celebrated in the wake of his death, was deserving of murder.
And this is such an important point. If it wasn't for Candace Owens, like literally basically just Candace Owens, there's others out there, but it's basically just Candace Owens, then the way that we would be talking about Charlie Kirk's death would be so different. We would be talking about how, what was Charlie murdered for? What was he doing at the exact time that he was murdered? How was he murdered? He was trying to engage in debate and have an open discussion with those that he disagreed with. And because of that, he was vulnerable. That's why he was vulnerable, is that he was putting himself out there to debate with those that he disagreed with. And he was killed for that reason. And that is the story. And the fact that he was killed by an LGBTQ radicalized person adds to the story. But the main story is that he was killed for his free speech and supporting free speech. And what has Candace Owens turned it into? A complex, convoluted conspiracy where everyone's to blame, from TPUSA to Erica to Jews to Israel to the government to thousands of people, that completely changed the whole point of what it should be about. And I think this is a point that that everyone should be making. Because it wasn't just that he was killed by a leftist and, therefore leftist violence is a big problem, which it is. And that's a big part of the story. But it was even a leftist who's trying to engage in open, reasoned discussion with people that oppose them. If they're killed in that moment, that should be the story, is that our society is not willing to discuss things openly. And it's almost always the left right now that resorts to violence. It doesn't necessarily have to be. There's right-wing violence too, of course, but most of it at this day and age is from the left. And so that's the story that got lost. And it's basically all because of Candace Owens. I can't think of another person to point to and blame them for changing this whole narrative, the whole story.
The evidence against Tyler Robinson is substantial, and yet the rules will still be followed. The evidence will still be presented carefully. The accused will be presumed innocent until proven guilty, and God willing, justice will be done. It's one of the hardest things a civilization ever asks of itself, to put aside passion and to present evidence in pursuit of truth and justice in a court of law. It's also one of the most beautiful and one of the most fragile things that we've inherited in the West. A room where the accused gets his day in court before an impartial law and an impartial jury of his peers. It took thousands of years to build that room. But on the other side of the country, behind a podcast microphone and in front of cameras, another trial is taking place. This trial has no lawyers. It has no judge. It has no jury, no burden of proof, no legal standards for presenting and submitting evidence. To Candace Owens and her millions of followers, Tyler Robinson is innocent. He's a fall guy, a patsy, a plant put there by unseen forces who are really pulling the strings. Charlie's friends and family, the FBI, Israel, the Jews. Who really killed Charlie Kirk? Well, the answer to that depends on what day you happen to be listening to Candace Owens, because it changes from week to week. And every week, for weeks and weeks and months, Candace has announced that she's closer than ever to finding the real culprit, and that you'll just have to tune into the next episode for a few more answers. In Candace's trial, the winners are determined by likes and shares, by the whims of the mob, and by schoolyard insults. Insight comes in the form of gossip and hearsay, and the occasional mystic encounter in a dream, of course. As for the overwhelming evidence presented in the actual court, Candace isn't weighing the evidence and finding it thin. She's telling you not to weigh it at all. And her millions and millions of followers are listening to her every word. If the courtroom in Utah represents the glory of Western civilization, And it does. A modern order only dreamt of by ancient slaves and medieval peasants who suffered under the whims of kings or the fury of mobs. Well, then the podcast studio and the online audience of Candace Owens represents something very different. It represents everything our ancestors built civilization to escape. It represents the old default. You see it all the time online. Someone makes a careful, well-reasoned case, lays out the facts, walks through the logic, and arrives at a conclusion. And then another person responds not with a better argument, but with an attack, with contempt, with volume, with a sneer, with a cutting little line about how ugly or stupid the person is. Now, for most of our lives, responding to a well-reasoned argument with an ad hominem attack was a sure sign you were losing. But not today. Not on the internet. Today, the sneer wins. The audience treats the person with attitude as more authoritative than the person with evidence. But there are two completely different ways to keep score in an argument, and they belong to two completely different kinds of society.
Yeah, I mean, what he's saying is so true. It's so true. And part of the problem is that it drags everyone down to it. I mean, I'm not innocent either when it comes to engaging in petty attacks against those. It's usually in response to those that are engaging in petty attacks. So I think they bring it on themselves, but I can't claim to be, above it all when, after all, this is my background. But High Velvet Lace, yeah, it does. But, we're responding in kind. So it's hard to stay above the fray when when they're doing all the low punches. It feels like it's justified to do low punches back. If Candace Owens was actually just offering reasonable arguments and reasonable questions, then I don't think that this backlash would be going on. She's not. And she's not just asking questions, she's refusing the answers to the questions. She's asking questions, but she refuses any answers that don't fit in line. And she does. She tries to rile up the mob, and basically she encourages mob justice. Can you imagine if Candace Owens was in charge of the legal procedure? Would be a mess. So, anyways, I agree with what Jeremy's saying, even if that makes me somewhat hypocritical.
In the world you and I were raised in, a guilt-innocence culture, also known as a truth culture, well, the person with the better argument carries the day. He can be meek, or he can be unimpressive. He can be the least charismatic man in the room. But if his evidence is better, well, then he takes the point. The claim outranks the man. But in an honor culture, that's not how you keep score at all. In an honor culture, the man who answers an argument with dominance wins, because the whole contest isn't actually about who's right. It's about who's of higher status. And status is settled by the display of dominance, not by the evidence. The sneer isn't a failure to make an argument. In an honor culture, the sneer is the argument. And in the third world, it's the winning one. Last week, Candace Owens and right-wing commentator Andrew Wilson began a negotiation for a possible debate over the Charlie Kirk case. In their back and forth, Wilson proposed an objective standard: no personal attacks and no ad hominems. If one is made, said Wilson, that person loses by default, enforced by the moderator. Candace's response was revealing. Quote, "Stop being so soft. The public will decide who the winner and loser is, and you don't get to direct them in that judgment with some obscure fine print clause." In other words, no objective standards that follow the classical rules of debate need apply. Insults and ad hominems are fair game, and the score is kept not by an impartial moderator, but by the public, by the mob. This is why Candace hates contracts and hates courts, by the way, and it's why those are the only places she can actually be defeated. In fact, the entire purpose of contracts in courts is to defeat people like Candace Owens and the third world mentality that they champion. In 2011, two psychologists, Angela Lang and Dove Cohen, published a framework in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology comparing our culture with the honor cultures of the rest of the world. They found that in our Western culture, something they called dignity culture, your worth is yours. Quote, each individual has inherent worth, and this worth doesn't depend on the esteem of other people. This worth is neither conferred by others, nor can it be taken away by them. As such, it is inalienable. Nobody can take it from you because nobody gave it to you. You're judged on your character and your achievements based on objective standards. All men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. The scorecard of the rest of the world is different. Lang and Cohen map the attitudes and behaviors of people from honor cultures too. In an honor culture, they found, your worth is on loan. It's issued to you by the people watching, and it can be revoked by the people watching too. In an honor culture, an insult is a real injury to your standing, and letting a challenge go unanswered is a kind of social death. Donald Trump exploited this emerging third world mentality in our culture to great effect. We all remember those early primary debates in 2015 and 2016. Traditional Republicans armed with facts and figures took the stage against Donald Trump, and they walked into a buzzsaw. Trump made fun of Rand Paul's looks, and he won.
Is Jeremy Boring not a Trump guy? I mean, I tend to agree with him when he's talking about Trump's flaws in this instance. But I'm curious if any of you know if Jeremy's kind of like a never Trumper. I haven't really heard him discuss it that much.
Called Marco Rubio Little Marco, and he won. He called Jeb Bush low energy and Ted Cruz Lion Ted, and he said Megyn Kelly had blood coming out of her wherever, and he won. The crowd went nuts. Of course it did. It was something we'd never seen before in American politics, not in our lifetime anyway. It was hilarious. Our rational brains switched off. Our lizard brains were activated. Nobody remembers the facts or logical arguments from those debates. We all remember Trump, the insult comic.
When you say he is now, EJ, do you mean he is pro-Trump now?
But what was novel and hilarious in 2015 is ubiquitous and tragic today. It often feels like the entire idea of reasoned debate and principled opposition to social pressure has collapsed entirely. Thanks to the internet and social media, the gates have been thrown open. Our public square now includes not only Americans, but everyone in the world with internet access. The comment section can include your family and your community, but it can include a tribal sheik in Afghanistan and half the population of India too. And once you get past your family and your community, well, all the rest of them are relying on the old default as their scoreboard.
Yeah, well, I'm curious what you guys think, because I obviously am a Trump fan, but, that juvenile behavior, I thought it was funny at the time. I'm trying to remember, but I also recognize that it was juvenile, and it should be beneath a presidential candidate. But it was authentic, and it was entertaining. But regardless, my support for Trump stems from his policies, not from his behavior. His behavior leaves much to be desired.
Nowadays, the truth is whatever gets the most likes from an audience, often largely consisting of foreign accounts and foreign bots, and sometimes powered by foreign intelligence agencies manufacturing social proof to pressure you and your neighbors into their own third world way of thinking. The values that used to discipline our public square have been quietly outvoted, not by immigration, or at least not only by immigration, but also by importation. We plunged our discourse into a global scorecard, and the global scorecard runs on a completely different operating system that the West spent thousands of years replacing. The third world values slowly displacing our own: tribal loyalty, blood over justice, social proof over truth. None of that was invented in Jordan or Iran or Africa. Our own ancestors lived by those same values too, and none of us today is immune. And that's the whole point. Third world thinking isn't some foreign disease that we catch. It's a native condition that we were all born with, but learned to overcome. The third world isn't strange. We're strange. That's why America has almost single-handedly invented the modern world. Not because we're just like everyone else, because we're not like everyone else. Because we're exceptional. We are the exception. The West is the exception. The simplest things that we take the most for granted in the West are among the strangest innovations in human history. Something as innocuous as the price tag is unbelievably strange. Earlier this year, the New York Times hosted a podcast conversation on whether theft is ever justified. They were responding to a new trend among young progressives in Brooklyn that they call micro-looting, an act of liberation against big corporations. Essentially, it's a fancy way of describing petty theft from Whole Foods. One of the guests on the show was Hassan Piker, a Twitch streamer with millions of followers, most of them young, most of them American. Piker said that he's pro-stealing from big corporations, and his reason was that those corporations steal far more from their own workers. His fellow guest, the New Yorker's Gia Tolentino, said she had actually stolen food from Whole Foods herself, and she hadn't felt bad about it a bit, and that taking from a big box store is, quote, not very significant as a moral wrong. The Times editor hosting them wondered aloud why she should have to pay for organic avocados when, quote, Jeff Bezos has too much money. Piker went further. He said that if it were as easy as pirating a movie, he'd steal a car. He said we ought to get back to the good stuff, bank robberies and stealing priceless artifacts. Now, you can dismiss that as the posturing of an online grifter, and sure enough. But underneath the posturing is a serious claim, and it's believed by a growing number of people on the American left, and it doesn't stop with petty theft. On December 4th, 2024, United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was murdered in cold blood. He was murdered for being the CEO of United Healthcare. His alleged murderer is left-wing extremist Luigi Mangione, and according to Emerson College, 41% of voters 18 to 29 say that the killing was at least somewhat acceptable. That's because in the Marxist view, as in the Third World view, a financial transaction is never just two people trading. There's always a strong party and a weak party, a winner and a loser, someone on top and someone underneath. They arrive there by different roads. The honor culture asks who got the better of whom. Marx asks who exploited whom. But both roads end in viewing the transaction itself as a status competition. Wages aren't payment, they're what's left after a theft. Profit isn't the reward for creating value, it's the measure of what's been stolen. And once you've accepted that, well, then stealing from Walmart isn't stealing at all. It's collection on a debt. It's getting yours back. It's regaining the honor that was taken from you. It feels like restoration. You can watch this mentality in operation today in third world barter cultures, places where price isn't fixed, where what a thing costs depends on who you are and who I am and what stands between us. You ask, how much for that? And the answer comes back, well, for you, my friend. Rich Westerners think that it's novel and charming to go barter in the third world, but it's neither. It's common and it's destructive. The second you hear those words, for you, my friend, a war has started. Because now the price isn't a fact, it's a negotiation, and a negotiation has a winner and a loser. If I get more out of you than the thing is worth, then I won, you lost. If you talk me down below what a thing is worth, well, now you won and I lost. Buying a phone case, buying a chicken, buying a rug, every one of those transactions becomes a small contest over who walks away richer and who walks away having been taken. Multiply that by every exchange day after day your entire life, and you come to understand why, in much of the world, a haggle can end with a body on the ground. Just last year in Egypt, a 28-year-old man was stabbed in the heart by a street vendor during an aggressive...
Yeah, EJ? I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, JP. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, I mean, I have a little bit of commentary I was thinking about with this line of reasoning that he was going into, but kind of just in the mood to listen right now.
Of haggle over the price of a prickly pear. Not long before, a fruit seller in India was shot by a customer over the price of mangoes. In places where honor outranks justice, most of it never gets reported and less of it gets punished. Now consider the Western system that we've inherited and how miraculous it is. If I offer hamburgers for $5 and you have $5 and are hungry, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter for you, my friend. It doesn't matter who I am. We can transact business. If you want the hamburger more than you want the $5, and I want the $5 more than I want the hamburger, we both win. You got the thing you wanted more than what you had. I got the thing that I wanted more than what I had. There's no winner and there's no loser. There's two winners. We didn't have to be friends. We didn't have to be kin. We didn't have to like each other. We don't ever have to meet again. We cooperated in a way that left us both better off than we were 5 minutes ago. Only because this marvel has become common to us do we fail to recognize it for the marvel that it is. The fixed price isn't natural. Offering the stranger dignity and honesty isn't natural. Corruption is natural. Unequal treatment is natural. The power struggle, the haggle, the double cross, those are the factory settings of our species, and they have been since Cain killed Abel. What's weird is what the Nobel Prize-winning economist Douglas North called the impersonal exchange. In his book, The Rise of the Western World, written with Robert Paul Thomas, North traces the long climb all the way from 10th century Europe to the point where, by 1700, the Netherlands and England had assembled a structure of property rights and impersonal exchange. And that structure is what set off the explosion of prosperity we still enjoy today. We shouldn't be surprised at which culture did the climbing. 3,000 years ago, every merchant on every road carried two sets of weights, the heavy one for buying and the light one for selling. The oldest law in the world had tried to abolish the practice, but it was the God of Israel who made it a religious matter. You shall have a full and honest weight, a full and honest measure. Unequal weights and measures, Solomon wrote, are an abomination to the Lord. Not inefficient, not suboptimal, an abomination, a moral horror in the same vocabulary that the law reserves for idolatry and child sacrifice. Because the honest price is not a market technicality. It's a claim about the man across the counter, that he bears the image of God just as surely as you do. That he's not a mark, that what you charge him is a matter God himself intends to take up with you personally. The church took that claim and spent thousands of years building machinery for it. Canon lawyers argued the just price into existence. Merchant guilds swore oaths on relics. Confessors assigned restitution to men who had shaved a coin or short-weighted a stack. The medieval church made cheating a stranger a matter for your soul, not merely for your reputation, and a civilization that believes God is auditing the scales doesn't need to know your cousin in order to trade with you. A deal between strangers only works if something guarantees the deal. And for most of history, that something was your clan. It was the people who knew you, the people who could vouch for you, the people who would avenge you. Trade outside that circle and you were on your own, so mostly people just didn't. What the West slowly built was a way to make trade with the stranger just as dependable as trade within your clan. You didn't even have to know the stranger at all, and you could depend on the transaction. Why? Because there were contracts that a court would enforce. There was property that a king couldn't seize. There was merchant law that crossed borders. There were 1,000 unglamorous inventions whose entire purpose was to take the enforcement of a deal out of the hands of your relatives and hand it to something impartial, so that the man across the counter could be neither your enemy nor your kin, but your equal, bound by the same rules as you are. Centuries of work to arrive at the price tag, to get the ego and the honor and the shame out of every transaction. All that only to be told now by a streamer with a Twitch channel, by democratic socialists, and by the whole of the left that you can't be a winner, that you're merely a victim of exploitation, that you must reclaim your honor. But an economy with a fixed price tag isn't the only weird miracle that the West built. The West also built a culture where we elevate truth and justice above tribal loyalties. Sadly, many of us are forgetting that too. In 2015, Tucker Carlson said, quote, "You know what? If my brother committed a mass murder, I would not criticize him in public. He's my brother, period. Under no circumstances will I criticize my family in public, ever. That's the rule, and I'm not breaking it." Now, loyalty is generally a good thing, and loyalty to your family is a real virtue. But it isn't the highest virtue.
I can't believe Tucker said that, especially considering who his brother is.
Refusing to criticize a mass-murdering brother is placing the tribe above the truth. It's placing blood above justice. And there's a whole world outside our borders where that kind of thinking is common. They nod their heads in agreement. But it isn't our way. The United Nations estimates that 5,000 women and girls are murdered in honor killings worldwide every year. And the researchers who study it believe the real number is far higher. In 2003, a 17-year-old girl named Shafilia Ahmed was suffocated to death by her own parents after she refused an arranged marriage and expressed the desire to become a lawyer. It didn't happen in Pakistan. It happened in the United Kingdom, once the crown jewel of the West. Police in England and Wales now record roughly 3,000 honor-based abuses every single year. And it's almost certainly an undercount. After all, terrible crimes go unreported by families who are more loyal to family honor than they are to justice. We read these stories and we're rightly horrified, but the thinking that leads to them isn't as far away as we'd like to believe. There's a political thinker who's become fashionable in certain corners in recent years. His name is Carl Schmitt, a German jurist whose 1932 book, The Concept of the Political, has become the basis for a new pattern of post-liberal right-wing thought. People like Curtis Yarvin and Adrian Vermeule invoke him often. Schmitt argued for what he called the autonomy of the political. Politics is severed from the moral order and put in its own category, answerable to nothing above it. And inside that category sits what Schmitt called the friend-enemy distinction. All of politics reduced to rewarding friends and punishing enemies. Now, just as it's not wrong to have family loyalties and natural affections for your own people, it's not wrong to recognize friends and enemies in politics. I certainly have enemies, and I spent a considerable amount of time fighting them. That isn't what Schmitt is selling. Schmitt takes the one true thing and makes it the only thing. Rewarding friends and punishing enemies stops being a piece of politics and becomes the entire point of politics, the highest good, the thing every other consideration bows to. Which is exactly how it works in an honor culture, where loyalty to the tribe outranks truth, outranks justice, outranks everything. Schmitt didn't invent anything, of course. All he did was take the oldest and most basic arrangement on Earth, laundered it through a German law faculty, and then sold it back to the West as some sort of sophisticated political theory. The friend-enemy distinction is just a permission structure. It's the logic that tells a nation that its enemies are owed nothing. And once a people believes that, well, then there's no atrocity that can't be justified. Schmitt himself, it should be noted, was a card-carrying Nazi. And that's the grim world that Candace and Tucker and Hassan Piker and all the rest of them are driving us toward. They get there by different means, but they all get to the same place. See, you either believe in objective truth, you believe in an impartial system, you believe in the primacy of justice over tribe and over wealth and over might, or you don't. The West built something completely different. On a cold March night in 1770, a crowd gathered in front of the Custom House on King Street in Boston and began pelting a handful of British soldiers. First they hit them with snowballs, then with ice, then oyster shells, and then clubs. The soldiers opened fire. When it was over, 5 men lay dead or dying in the street. Boston had its massacre. Paul Revere engraved the scene, a tidy line of redcoats firing on command into unarmed colonists, and copies went up across all the colonies as anti-British propaganda. Every instinct in that town wanted those soldiers to hang. But one young lawyer stood up and agreed to defend them. His name was John Adams. He was a patriot. His own cousin, Samuel Adams, was the firebrand feeding the fury. But he took the case anyway, because he believed that the law and the truth were owed to a man, even when that man was the enemy of his own people, especially then. Adams stood in front of the jury and told them, quote, "Facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes, our inclination, or the dictates of our passions, they cannot alter the state of the facts and evidence." He got most of the men acquitted. 2 of them were convicted of a lesser charge and branded on the thumb. The rest walked free. John Adams paid a price. He was savaged in the press. He lost more than half of his law practice. But 3 years later, on the anniversary of the shooting, he wrote in his diary that it had been, quote, "one of the most gallant, generous, manly, and disinterested actions of my whole life, and one of the best pieces of service I ever rendered my country." Ask where a Congregationalist lawyer in colonial Massachusetts got the idea that his enemy was owed a defense, and the answer isn't the Enlightenment, it's the pulpit. Quote, "The Christian religion," he said, "is above all the religions that ever prevailed or existed in ancient or modern times, the religion of wisdom, virtue, equity, and humanity. It is resignation to God. It is goodness itself to man." The law told Israel's judges in Deuteronomy, "You shall not be partial in judgment. You shall hear the small and the great alike." And in Leviticus, "You shall not be partial to the poor or defer to the great." James told the early Christian church that seating the rich man in front and the poor man on the floor made them judges with evil thoughts. And Christ, in the most impossible sentence anyone has ever been asked to obey, told a people under military occupation to love their enemies and pray for the men persecuting them. John Adams did just that, and it worked out for him in the end. He went on to help draft the Declaration of Independence, to nominate George Washington as commander-in-chief, and to be both the first vice president and second president of the United States of America. Last year, on September 10th.
Gotta pause it just in case there's any copyright strikes. I have a lot of thoughts going through my head. You know, I agree with pretty much everything. But my brain is not moving as fast as his, so I'm just enjoying listening to him talk, and wanted to just give you guys a chat space. So
Charlie Kirk was assassinated. For 33 hours after the shooting, the FBI had nothing to go on. Thousands of tips, but no name. Then the surveillance images went public, and in a house in southern Utah, a mother and a father looked at the face on the screen and saw their own son. When they confronted him, he reportedly confessed. He told them he wanted to end his own life. But they talked him down, and then they turned him in. They drove him to the sheriff's office themselves. They sat with their own son, and they chose justice over their own flesh and blood, which is very nearly the hardest thing a human being can be asked to do. That's the choice, laid out as clean as it's ever been laid out. Tucker's instinct, the tribe, the blood, no matter what. And the Adams instinct, the Robinson family instinct, the truth, the law, the justice, even when it costs you your own. One of those is the old default. The other is an institution slowly built by God and his followers ever since he revealed himself at Sinai. Which brings us to the question under all of it. Why is the West different? Why did we get these ideas in the first place? Why did we get the fixed price and the John Adams instinct and the best argument wins scorecard when almost no one else did? Because Christianity took a particular set of Jewish ideas and universalized them. The Jews of Israel had endured decades of Roman rule by the time Jesus arrived on the scene. But instead of bringing with him national renewal, as it was believed the Messiah would do, Jesus called his people to a new tribe. Quote, I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a person's enemies will be those of his own household. He said that unless a man, quote, hate his father, mother, wife, children, brothers, and sisters, as well as his own life, he cannot be my disciple. These were the first crack in the idea of the clan. Jesus, of course, wasn't abolishing the family or the nation, but he was demoting them. He was telling a man that there is a claim on his life that outranks the claim of his father, and the instant a man believes that, well, then he's no longer merely a member of a household, he's an individual, standing alone in front of God, personally accountable for what he does with the truth. Almost every strange thing about the West is born out of just that. Jesus' followers ran with the idea immediately.
So I have to say, as a father, you know, my love for my daughters is so great. I don't know if I could I don't know if I could do it. It's such a hard question. Thank God my daughters are perfect, so it's never going to happen. But that's just so unfathomable. I mean, I think it's the right thing to do. Objectively speaking, Robinson's parents did the right thing. I do not judge them. But me in that situation, I don't know.
And it made them look insane. They took a Jewish sect and admitted Greeks and Romans, Ethiopians, slaves. They didn't require any of them to become Jews first. In Christ, Paul said, there is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. Now, if you think Paul's statement reads as radical today, you can't believe how radical it was to the people who first read it. Roman households worshipped Roman ancestors. The church told converts that their real ancestry ran through a Galilean carpenter. Rome exposed unwanted infants on a hillside and left them there to die. Christians went out and collected them because the image of God doesn't require a father's acknowledgement. Rome had honor. Christianity had a God who was tortured to death by the state and vindicated anyway, which is...
Yeah, S-Files asks, how did Candace work for so many smart men and stay so darn dumb? That's a good question. The converse of the same question is, how did so many smart men fall for Candace? I think she's a really talented con woman. You know, I've been conned. I think we've all been conned. And she's good at it.
Is about the single most direct assault on honor logic ever devised, because it says that the crowd's verdict on a man tells you nothing whatsoever about his worth, that the worst humiliation can actually be the highest honor. And then the church began the slow climb over 2,000 years, and that slow, tedious climb is what actually built the world that you live in today. There's a book called The Weirdest People in the World, weird standing for Western, educated, industrialized.
I just love Jeremy's dog, just always sleeping there on the couch.
Rich, democratic. It was written by Harvard anthropologist Joseph Heinrich, and in it, Heinrich examines one of the strangest psychological differences between the West and everyone else, and he traces it back to something you would never guess: the church ending cousin marriage. Starting as early as the 6th century at gatherings like the Council of Agate in 506, the Western Church began banning marriage between relatives. And then it just kept widening the ban century after century until, at its height, it forbade marrying anyone out to your 6th cousin. It banned marrying a dead brother's widow. It banned in-laws and stepkin. It banned polygamy. And it insisted, radically for the time, that a real marriage required the free consent of the two individuals, not just the arrangement of their two families. Now contrast that with Persia at the same time. According to Heinrich, quote, Persian Zoroastrianism was not only promoting cousin marriage, but promoting marriage between siblings. When the church made this change, they changed the trajectory of the West forever.
Oh, but I like Zoroastrians. They're like the original Persians, and they're very peace-loving.
Nobody at the time was trying to invent the modern world. They were just trying to obey God about marriage. But when you stop people from marrying their cousins, you weaken the clan. You dissolve those dense, intermarried, blood-bound networks where every obligation you have runs to your kin and no one else. And what grows in the space where the clan used to be is something new in the history of the world: the individual. A person whose loyalty is not automatically owed to blood, and who therefore can be loyal to something higher than blood, to the truth, to the stranger, to the impartial law. In 2019, a team published a study in Science measuring this phenomenon. Region by region, they found that the longer a place lived under the Western Church, the lower its cousin marriage rate today, and the more individualistic, trusting of strangers, and fair to outsiders its people remain. The places that resisted the longest, like southern Italy, kept the tightest clans and the thickest corruption straight into the modern age. If you break the clan early, you make room for juries and contracts. If you leave it standing, well, then there's just no place to put them. In the pre-Christian world, the things we call corruption aren't seen as vices. They're virtues. Loyalty to blood over the rules, taking care of your own first, never being publicly bested. Those aren't failures of the moral code. They are the moral code, the old one, the default one, the one it took the West thousands of years to build our way out of. The West isn't just being invaded by the old default, we're reverting to it. And the tragedy of reverting to it is that it kind of feels like coming home. And in a way it is, because it's really just the water that most of our species has been swimming in since the beginning of time. It feels honest because it feels natural, and it feels natural because it is natural, at least to fallen man. Third world thinking isn't a foreign import at all. It's just human nature unconstrained by Christian virtue. Kick out the scaffolding, and that nature is still there exactly as it always was, waiting. That's why the left and the right are arriving at the same destination, even though they're coming from opposite directions. The left says that the transaction is always theft, so take yours back. The right says that the tribe was always the point, so reward your friends and punish your enemies. Both believe more and more that humiliation is a substitute for debate. Neither of them is offering you anything new. They're offering you what everybody had before the West showed up, before Christianity showed up. Those captured by it will call us traitorous. They'll call us disloyal to family, to nation, to race, but that's a straw man. The answer isn't that family is bad, or that loyalty is bad, or that fighting is bad, or that having a people and a place and a tribe is bad. Nobody believes that, and no one has said it. What we believe is that those very fine things are not the very finest of things, that they're good, but they're not the highest good, and that a rightly ordered virtue is superior even when it's unpopular. You'll hear people say all of this was inevitable, that liberalism was doomed, that the West was always going to rot, that it's just the tide going out and there's nothing to be done, but don't buy it. It's just the same old dodge as saying that you're poor because of some ism or doomed because of some cabal, deciding that you have no agency so that none of it is your fault. If all of this is inevitable, it's only in the sense that entropy is inevitable. Yes, everything is prone to decay, but entropy can be resisted and entropy can be reversed. And human beings made in the image of God and commanded to impose order on the world can reverse it. The central figure in Western history and in Western ethics was, according to Scripture, despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and well acquainted with grief. And as one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. Despised, rejected, and right. Because in God's accounting, the esteem of the crowd doesn't measure the worth of a man. The love or rejection of a family doesn't determine his standing before God. The entire West was built on just that truth. Nobody made us forget it. We chose to forget, a little bit at a time. And the thing about a choice is that it can be made differently tomorrow. We built the fixed price. We built the jury. We built the man who turns his own son in because justice is owed even by a father. Those were choices, hard choices made over centuries by people who mostly couldn't see the whole of what they were building. We inherited the finished cathedral, and we've let it fall into neglect. But we can choose to rebuild it. We can tell the truth when it costs us. We can pursue justice without partiality. We can deal honestly when cheating would profit us. We can refuse to follow the crowd, to go to church and submit to the one who did what was right even when he was alone on a hilltop, nailed to a tree. And when the old default comes for you, dressed up as loyalty, dressed up as courage, dressed up as justice for the exploited, well, you'll feel the pull of it. It'll feel like home. It will feel natural. And in a very real sense, it is. It's the birthright of the meat, but it's not the birthright of the man. We inherited something else, something better, something weirder. So keep it, teach it, and let's build it again.
Well, makes me want to convert. No, he's really smart. He has a lot of great points. Almost too much packed into too short a time period for me to comment on. It's like very profound, a lot of philosophical stuff going on. So I would probably need some time to think about it before I offer anything useful. But, you know, this question that he brings up about turning in your own child, that's something I struggle with, the idea, personally. And again, I think it's the right thing to do. And if it's the right for someone else to do it, then it's the right thing for me to do it. But could I actually do that? I can't imagine it, you know. But I have a baby and a 7-year-old, so you know, it would be it's too hypothetical and abstract. I'm wondering, what do you guys think? You know, doing the right thing, even if it means turning in your own kid. I don't know about that. You guys, I'm gonna stick around, but I do need to use the bathroom and get something to drink. If you guys stick around, then I'm gonna stick around. Okay? So just give me 2 minutes. Okay. Yeah, velvet lace. I mean, tribal queen. Yeah, when I say my daughter's perfect, I mean, she's human, but she's perfect in my eyes. Um, yeah, I. It's a tough one. It's a tough one to imagine. You guys, I saw a really good video. Let me see if it's on my history. And because I think it was really informative and I want to share it. Let me see if I have it on my history. How do I? YouTube. Trying to find my history. My history. There we go. This video is really good. Recommend it. It was by someone really smart named The Whole Truth. But this is history. Where's history? Okay. You all. You guys don't judge me by what you see in my history. If I have some silly stuff. Okay. This is the one that I was watching. It's 25 minutes. Are you guys cool with watching this?
The planet Earth is not infinite.
Because I feel like this guy explained... Sorry, I gotta close the door. 1 second. This guy explained the concept behind socialism and communism. And cool. So I thought it was good. Unless somebody else has a recommendation. The eclectic journalist EJ. Yeah, I'm curious about how they're being doxxed. I told them that if they're being doxxed, they should file a restraining order. And serve it on Candace Owens or whoever is doxing them. Chances are they're not going to show up to court. You get a default. We're watching. Okay, so I just thought this was a good video. Let me I'll put it on to a little bit faster. But
It's 70.
this has nothing to do with Candace or anything like that. This is just a good explanation of communism and socialism.
1% water, 29% of it is land. Of that land, about half is useful. This is what everyone is, for lack of a better term, fighting over. Scarcity, and who owns what drives the thinking behind every system humans have come up with. And I've been hearing about one of those systems a lot lately.
The S word.
Socialism.
Is that socialism?
Socialist.
Socialism.
I am a democratic socialist.
Ask 10 people to define socialism and you'll hear 10 different answers. From the government owns the businesses, to free healthcare, to Denmark, to equality. But there is far more to it than that. This is a word that wars have been fought over. That brings emotion out of people that almost everyone has an opinion on.
I believe in socialism.
And when you call it socialism, I think it's a misnomer.
Socialism or capitalism?
Capitalism.
I think it depends on your interpretations.
I don't know anywhere in the world where true socialism has worked.
And some of those opinions are changing. More people are expressing interest in socialism today than they have in decades. So why did it ever come about? Why has it stood the test of time? Does it mean the same thing today? What exactly is socialism? This video is sponsored by Zapier. More on them later. At first, there was no need to think much about the idea of ownership. We walked around and ate what we hunted or picked out of the ground. But as the population grew, we started bumping into each other. Tribes, clans, civilizations began to form. Skirmishes grew into battles, which evolved into wars, with few exceptions, leaving the leader of whichever group won these wars the owner of whatever land they controlled. It was theirs to give. One person owned it. But the population continued to grow. Kingdoms got bigger. One man could not defend every border, could not judge every dispute, or till every field. So the rulers started giving land to trusted warriors and lords. Hold this land as your own. Defend it. In return, you'll send me your knights when I need them. Those lords, facing the exact same problem as the rulers, but on a smaller scale, divided the land further and gave it to people to work. Hold this land, grow food for us on it. In return, I'll protect you. Called different things around the world, varying in a few different ways, but the same basic idea. This system, feudalism, was how most of the world operated. A handful of well-connected people owned the land. People started to travel further. Ships got bigger. Villages turned into towns, towns into cities. The ability to grow something on land and then sell it to someone in a town or distant country for money instead of just consuming it yourself, this really started to change how people looked at land and where things start to get interesting and familiar, where everything changed. Rulers, these queens, kings, emperors, started to change what they demanded from the lords they had given land to. Forget your knights. I'll build my own army. From now on, you pay me taxes. Gold, silver coins, or goods I can trade to other kingdoms. That land I gave you can do more than just feed your estate. Figure out how to turn a profit on it and then give me some of that profit. Yes, Your Highness. And as was tradition, the lords turned right around and said the same thing to the people working their estates or running its workshops. New plan, everybody. Grow more than you need, sell it at the market, give me some of that profit. That simple act of changing what it was about land that made it valuable, moving from fight for me when I call to pay me money, meant it didn't really matter who owned the land anymore. Whether you could fight really well with a sword, whatever, as long as whoever owned it could pay the taxes on the land, which meant it was actually in the interest of the ruler now to let people buy, sell, and mortgage land. And so they did. Slowly at first, but over a couple centuries, many people could own the land. This marked the beginning of where we are today. It's this huge break from thousands of years of tradition where the thought that you, dear peasant, could own land was not even a concept. That was not a thought that people had. This is so interesting for a couple knock-on effects that I just have to touch on. It made the world less violent. The only way to acquire land stopped being raise an army and kill a bunch of people, take the land they were on as your own. You could just buy it instead now. Not saying it ended violence, of course not. These were violent times and violence continued, but a new option came into play. If someone figured out how to get more out of land than someone else, they would eventually use that profit, to buy that other person's land, expand whatever they were doing, make more profit, buy more land, building more and more capital. Which brings us to here, a big messy transition period between the eras when some could own land to anyone, in theory, could. Because while anyone could own land, that did not mean that everyone did own land. Peasant life was brutal. It was dangerous. You didn't live long. You couldn't leave the estate you were tied to without the Lord's permission. You had few freedoms, no real rights, but it was stable. Life on the manor weren't half bad. A sturdy cottage, my own strip in the open fields, and the commons where the pigs rooted and the wife gathered kindling. Sure, the Lord took his share, but come feast days we danced, drank, and slept like kings. The seasons ruled us, not some clock. We ate what we grew, mended what we broke, and knew every soul in the village, stable as the old oak. Then the enclosures came. One spring they arrived with ropes and talk of improvement, commons fenced for sheep, pay a fee to work my strip or we'll fold it into the big man's profitable fields. Progress, they said. Most of us couldn't. Suddenly we were free to leave the land that had fed us, free to trudge to the town with nothing but calloused hands and rumbling bellies. Now I stand at the factory gate before dawn, trading my hours for coins that vanish on rent and stale bread. No commons, no strip, no village dance, just the endless clatter of machines and the knowledge that I made some distant bastard rich while my children cough in a damp room I don't own. Oliver Twist, Les Miserables, A Christmas Carol, all stories that are just bigger versions of the story we just heard, same time period, with very few, if any, safety nets for those that couldn't establish themselves, except for workhouses, aka poorhouses, which were not that different from prisons. Employers could pay and treat the lowest rungs of society basically however they wanted. They needed money, so they didn't end up in the poorhouse or worse. Working conditions, the terrible pay, get hurt and you're completely out of a job, child labor, all the worst parts of working you've heard of. That was this period. So it is no wonder that this is the time when the idea of socialism develops, that the people as a group, not rich individuals, should get the fruits of their labor. First, it was this utopian idea based on right and wrong, and what if we just did things like this? There was no reason why it would happen, just that would be nice.
Pause it for copyright strike purposes. Offer my opinion that this guy breaks things down well. I love stuff like this, especially stuff about Cloward and Piven. I wish I knew who those were, so I can offer an intelligent opinion about it, but I don't. Socialism is gay. Yeah, socialism is gay. It is gay. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. I mean, in theory, some of it sounds nice. Gilby. I'm a Juby. In theory, it sounds nice, but it just doesn't work. I mean, I think it could work in certain societies, maybe, but it doesn't match human nature. And this guy, this video goes into it. And it certainly doesn't innovate, doesn't create anything.
Until one book raised the stakes. Capital, or the original version published in German Das Kapital, one volume turned into 3, 552 total pages. Karl Marx, most famous for the Communist Manifesto and who lends his name to Marxism, dropped what would become an enduring piece of history. Karl Marx was not a factory worker. He never stood at a factory gate before dawn. He was a middle-class kid from what is now Germany. Born in 1818, lawyer as a father, good education, PhD in philosophy. He wanted to be a professor. But his politics got in the way, so he became a journalist. And he was good at it. Good enough to get his newspaper shut down by the government. Then he got kicked out of Paris, then Brussels. By 1849, he landed in London, broke, and stayed there the rest of his life. And here's the part people don't spend much time on. Marx spent decades deep in poverty, pawning his coat in the winter. 3 of his children died young, and at one point, he couldn't afford a coffin. The man writing the book about capital had none of it. He survived on 2 things: freelance journalism, including a decade writing for a New York newspaper, and money from his best friend and writing partner Friedrich Engels, who co-wrote the Communist Manifesto. Engels' family owned cotton mills in Manchester, England. In a twist of irony, the book that would inspire revolutions against factory owners was funded by factory profits. So sitting in the British Museum room, day after day, year after year, Marx read everything. And we're talking everything: parliamentary reports, factory inspector records, economic data, and he asked just one simple question: why does this system produce so much wealth and so much misery at the same time? Capital, Volume 1, came out in 1867. Almost nobody noticed. He died in 1883. 11 people came to the funeral, people who would never have guessed that within 40 years, a third of the planet would be governed in his name, rallied by one very simple, very potent idea: profit is unpaid labor. When you walk into a store, you see prices on the shelves. You don't see the workers who made the product, how long they worked, or how much they were paid. The relationship between the person who made it and the person who buys it is hidden. Your purchase looks like a simple transaction: money for a shirt. But hidden inside that shirt is unpaid labor. The worker created more value than they were paid for. That difference, the profit, goes to the capitalist. Not necessarily because capitalists are evil, Marx would have said, but because it's built into how the wage system works. Rich owners keep getting richer and more powerful. Workers compete for jobs, which keeps wages down. To escape this, you, me, us, the people.
By the way, he's not... I think that this guy is just explaining what Karl Marx's argument is. Sorry for the creakiness of my chair. So he's not saying that this is actually the way it is, or that this is good or bad or whatever. I think that he's just summarizing Marx's argument, which I think is important to know. You know, just as there's nothing wrong with learning it, even if you're opposed to it, right? I think it's important.
People as a whole must own the means of making the shirt. It's the only way to escape this oppressive working for wages. And it is here that 2 opposing forces that refuse to budge fight over what exactly profit is. The capitalists saying, what about losses? The socialists saying, losses are just failed exploitation. Without profit, there can't be prices. How will you know what to make? We'll know. To date, where we are today, it is that final question, how to know what to make, that has proven very hard for socialist societies to answer. Experiment after experiment has had to try in their own way, because what is probably the most interesting thing about Das Kapital, the key literature of socialism, it does not say how things should work. Marx offered no ideas for how to do things differently, no system, no outline. It's a full critique of capitalism, but the other side of the equation is left almost completely to interpretation, to answer simple questions like, how do you decide what to stock a grocery store with? Walk into any grocery store along with hundreds of other people who will visit it each day, and as you walk through the aisle, choosing what you will and will not put in your cart, upon committing to some and paying for them, you are saying to whoever makes it, yes, I want this. And against the infinite number of other things I can buy with $5, I'll take it. Add this up with all the people deciding how to spend their $5, and useful signals appear to those who make things. The group that made what sold makes enough money to keep making the thing. The group that didn't is now aware that they shouldn't keep making the thing, at least not at that price. Unable to find a price that works, don't sell a thing for long enough, and all the materials work, everything that went into making the losing thing will eventually have to stop making those products and will now be available to be used by some new maker that wants to test their hand at chocolate bars. Day after day, signals coming in from people of all walks of life saying, keep making that, don't keep making that. A bottoms-up system that lets the people vote for how they want the world's scarce resources to be used. Now, walk into a different grocery store. The shelves were stocked months ago by a group of planners who sat in a room and decided how much bread the store would need, how much bread every store would need, how much wheat to grow that bread, how many tractors to harvest that wheat, how much steel to build those tractors. There's no vote to add up because the deciding has already happened. The signal doesn't travel from your cart up to the maker, It travels from the plan down to the factory. The factory's job isn't to figure out what you want, it's to hit the number it was given. Make 10,000 chocolate bars this quarter. Whether anyone wants those chocolate bars is a separate question, and honestly, it's not the factory's question. And when nobody buys them, nothing stops. The materials, the workers, the machines, none of it gets released to some new maker with a better idea because they were never the factories to release. They stay right where the plan put them until a new plan says otherwise. The feedback that took one bad sales week in the first store takes months, years, sometimes never in this one. Day after day, decisions flowing in one direction, from the few at the top to the many below, a top-down system, where a small group of people get to decide how the world's scarce resources will be used. But what about the real world? Not two imaginary grocery stores. What if we could set up an experiment?
What do you guys think? Is this interesting to everyone watching this? I didn't know what else to do, and I wanted to keep the live going. I had nothing in particular to get into today.
One city, one people, split down the middle for 28 years, then rejoined for 35. The finest grained natural experiment the world has ever run on socialism. Berlin is the experiment inside the experiment. It's almost too good of an experiment. You have allies during World War II, everyone working together to beat Germany, but they were not all friends. Capitalist in one group, the United States, England, and France, and a bunch of others. And then you have the Soviet Union, a fully socialist country, which became that way with a lot of help from the writing of Marx in Capital and the Communist Manifesto, which we've talked about a lot. This is what it looks like, where he said revolution is necessary to tear down the system. It will not tear itself down. Rise against capitalism. This is what Vladimir Lenin used during the Bolshevik Revolution. Anyway, with Germany defeated, the usual splitting up of the losers' territory began. Germany as a whole was split up into 4 different zones, with each of the 4 allied countries administering part of it. But Berlin was too important. It was the capital. France, the US, and England were like, no, just because it's deep in the Soviet side doesn't mean we don't get to be there. So Berlin, completely surrounded by Soviet-occupied Germany, was split into 4 zones. The US, England, and France in the west.
You want me to play the second tape video? No copyright issues? Okay. Yeah, I'm down to do that. This was more of just a recommendation if you guys are interested in it. But I thought it was a good video. Oh wow, it's already 11:40. I actually have a trial tomorrow, so I probably can't stay up that much later. Where is my favorite journalist? The eclectic journalist. Okay, let me just type it in. Well, we never fixed the first one. Yeah, EJ, I do want. But we didn't finish the first one because of the copyright strike. Should I just fast forward it through the it looks like it's going on through here. So it looks like it goes on through the end. So I'll go on to the second video. Episode 2, the building blocks. But I do actually have like a trial tomorrow. So I'm gonna need to get some sleep in like 20 minutes. Such a cool intro.
December 2022, Romanian authorities raid the Tate compound near Bucharest. Andrew and Tristan get locked up on suspicion of human trafficking, forming an organized crime group and related offenses. They spend months in custody, then move to house arrest and judicial control. Prosecutors later formally charged them. The case includes allegations of exploiting women for online content. Andrew faces additional SA allegations in the Romanian file. The indictment hits procedural problems. In late 2024, a court sends it back to prosecutors. Travel restrictions get eased in early 2025. The brothers fly to Florida. Romanian conditions are later fully lifted in 2026 while investigations continue and expand. More trafficking, money laundering, etc. They've gone back and forth between countries since. Meanwhile, the UK side grows. Bedfordshire Police and the CPS authorize new charges. First wave in 2025, 21 charges total. SA, assault, trafficking, controlling prostitution. Then
Let's skip ahead past the Tate intro. How is that? How far is that? Let me know what time to skip to, if you want me to.
in July 2026, 38 more charges involving alleged victims.
But again, I'm only going to have 15 more minutes. My trial might not start tomorrow, but I gotta come prepared, and so I don't think my client would like it if I come unrested. It's not a criminal trial. If it was a criminal trial, I would be much more stressed. It's a eviction case, and it's probably not going to even go to trial. But maybe I'll talk about it if it ends up being an interesting case.
Victims from 2010 to 2017 combined a total 59 counts. Andrew faces multiple SA accounts, trafficking, assault, plus indecent images and extreme pornography related charges. Tristan faces SA and trafficking counts. They deny everything and call it political. Then, on July 18th, 2026, U.S. Marshals arrest both brothers in Miami on a UK extradition warrant. Timing is dramatic, right as Andrew is about to appear at a bare-knuckle boxing event. On July 20th, they had their initial appearance in federal court. They contest extradition, held without bond so far, and a detention hearing for August 13 to decide if
I find what you're saying to be really informative, but since you're the creator, EJ, and you're telling me to skip ahead, I'm going to follow your advice. Oh no, you made me skip ahead straight to the cockroach. Straight to the cockroach. Ew.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I hope everyone is doing well, and welcome if you are new. Welcome, welcome. Okay, guys, like, going through this Tate stuff has been absolutely insane. Like, literally, my mind feels like mesh. I have, like an ungodly amount of papers lying around everywhere. Here's a pile, there's a pile up here. I mean, it is crazy. I have been going through so many videos and I have been trying to narrow things down. And there's a lot of stuff that we missed for last episode during that time. And I actually found out all kinds of stuff because I was trying to track down the Aston Martins. It's so crazy. Like, trying to piece together all of this craziness has been nuts. And I really hope that I can pull it together for this video. I don't think I've ever been so nervous and worried about a video that I've made as this one. And I'm like extremely late getting it out because I like to, when I do a series, get them out once a week. And this one is late because of everything that has been going on to get this video put together. And I mean, it's just crazy. But I do have a very interesting timeline, which is going to help us a lot. Okay, hopefully you guys can see that.
Timelines are so helpful.
We are going to actually go back to the beginning because there's some stuff I missed. There was some stuff I was wrong about. And there's also some stuff that's just really, really interesting. So I've got my very interesting timeline here. So 1986, Andrew was born. 1988, Tristan was born. The parents divorced in 1997 and moved to Luton. I can't get this to pull up on screen because for some reason I have access to it on my phone, but not on the computer on any browser. But it's the New Yorker article Empire of Abuse, written by Heidi Blake. So we're going to go over this first. And I'm not reading from the beginning. I'm just reading the pertinent parts where we are on the timeline. The times I struck a woman in passion, I never left a mark. The Tate's father wrote on Facebook in 2011. Super control of the human animal. They love me still. Emery Tate was a celebrated black chess master who served as a staff sergeant and a linguist in the U.S. Air Force. So he was a linguist. Okay, so that part is true, but he wasn't a linguist for the CIA, and there's no like evidence that he spoke the best Russian in the world and was,
Russian within
all the stuff that Andrew said. And he was in the Air Force. He met their mother, a white British woman named Eileen Ashley, on a brief posting to the UK. The couple married and moved to America, and in 1986, Andrew was born in a military hospital in Washington, D.C. Tristan came a year and a half later, followed by a sister, Janine. Andrew has described his father's influence in scores of posts, podcasts, and videos. My dad was a hero in every way. He has said, I feared my dad as if he was God himself. Emery was brilliant, charismatic, and mercurial. In 1992, he was discharged from the Air Force after being diagnosed as having conditions that interfere with military service, including narcissistic personality disorder. Back in civilian life, he was convinced that he was being monitored by the CIA and the family car was being tailed, and that he was under attack by assailants from Eastern Europe. Okay, so this is the thing. There is an extreme Eastern Europe. There are some themes that I've started noticing as I'm going through all this documentation on Andrew and his brother, and it's so crazy. And so the theme is chess. One of the themes is chess. One of the themes is the Matrix. Another theme is this Eastern Europe thread that's ran through his life. And you're going to see these themes too. The world he lived in was a scary world, Andrew has said. He remembered Emery telling him, you're a Tate, they're going to come for you like they came for me. Now, I'm going to pause that right there. So, Andrew has a lot of respect for and love for his father. Okay, but he also was not treated well by his father, and he acts like his father was the most amazing man in the world, and he really was sort of a like bummy loser weird guy, and he was super misogynistic. So I found this article. Oh, and the other thing that happened as I was going to go do this, the browser that I normally use, Brave browser, like just wouldn't, the StreamYard just wouldn't work in it. Like it was just not registering anything. So I've had to switch browsers and log into everything in this browser, and then like all of my bookmarks, everything is in the other browser. So I have to keep moving it over, but I'm going to go find that article. Okay, so after Tate got famous or blown up, people started looking, reporters started looking into his history, and they found weird stuff that his dad had been posting. So let's look at that. Brothers Andrew and Tristan Tate spent their preteen years in the leafy town of Goshen, Indiana. Back then, in the 1990s, the city had some 24,000 residents, plus a large Mennonite population in the surrounding rural area. There weren't many biracial families like the Tates around, though. In the not-too-distant past, Goshen had been a sundown town. The sons of Eileen Ashley...
What's a sundown town? Does that mean, like, there's nothing going on after sundown? I've never heard that phrase before. I'm just curious.
A white working-class English woman, and Emery Tate Jr., a black military veteran and skilled chess competitor. Andrew and Tristan were surrounded by extended family growing up. They attended church with their cousins and played together at their parental grandmother's house. The American side of the Tate family is peppered with high achievers, particularly the women. The brothers' paternal grandmother, Emma Cox Tate, was an entrepreneur who set up a trucking company in the 1970s.
So everyone, I just looked this up because I've never heard this phrase before. A sundown town is a town or community that historically excluded certain racial or ethnic groups, most commonly black people, from living in or even being present after sunset. And there's more to it than that, but I never knew that. Can't be black there after sundown, huh? So that's pretty. It's pretty crazy if that was going on still around the 90s.
Attaining success in a male-dominated industry. Andrew and Tristan's aunts include lawyers, an Ivy League academic, and a business owner who operates a successful McDonald's franchise. My mother was very much subservient to my father, which was a good thing. But in the history of the men in the Tate family, complex figures who relied on violence and competition to forge their way in the world, that explains the development of Andrew and Tristan. Beginning with an abusive grandfather who allegedly beat his children with a belt, the Tate family stories, a number of them reported here for the first time, help us understand how the brothers went on to build a business empire that trades in misogynistic ideas and sells toxic self-help for the modern man. My mother was very subservient to my father, which was a good thing, Andrew once said in an interview. They used to have arguments, etc., and I think I learned a lot of lessons, I guess, on male and female dynamics to a degree from my childhood. In a statement, a representative for the brothers said, Andrew has always celebrated the success of the women in his family, and he has encouraged others to follow his example. He believes in traditional masculine values where the man's role is to support the women in achieving their goals. Elizabeth said her father, Emery Tate, was born in 1919 to a family of sharecroppers in Georgia and, according to legend, taught himself to read using discarded comic books. He ran away from home and was drafted into the Army in World War II, serving in the Red Ball Express, a trucking unit predominantly operated by black soldiers that delivered vital supplies to Allied troops. So this is the grandfather. He wasn't happy because he was discriminated against. Back then the troops were segregated, Elizabeth said. She added when he came back from the war, he took advantage of the GI Bill to help him finish high school, college, and ultimately law school. The former sharecropper found himself catapulted into the middle class, his daughter said. Emery became an attorney, building a successful law practice in Chicago. Elizabeth said he once successfully defended a black man from R-word charges in front of an all-white jury. I didn't understand what an accomplishment it was until I started practicing, she said. Despite his success in the city, she said her father maintained a small farm in Michigan where he would spend his weekends. One day, Emery went to a dinner near his office in Chicago where he met Emma Cox, who hailed from a more affluent biracial Southern family and had 4 children from a previous marriage. Elizabeth recounted. The pair ultimately wed and had 5 children together, including Andrew and Tristan's father, Emery Tate. And so his grandparents are biracial as well. So that kind of explains why they look so white, because they have more white genes than just, if his father's father was black and so was his father's mother. But instead, it's his father's father was black and his father's mother was white. And then in the same thing for him, his father's black and then his mother is white. So there's much more genetic genes there. So it kind of makes sense, because looking at these pictures and them standing next to each other and all this stuff, I'm like, man, they're so white, Not that any of that's a bad thing. It's something I noticed. They also divorced. So the grandparents divorced in 1996 after the elder Emery Tate became increasingly vituperative towards his wife. I have no idea what that means. I'm going to have to look that word up. While Elizabeth says that her dad was compassionate, in a 2014 post from the younger Emery's Facebook page alleged his father was the most savage man in the universe, to the extent that the son once contemplated killing him. Beating with a leather belt was all I knew, Emery Jr. wrote. So this is Andrew's father talking about his father. Expressing pride that he did not repeat the pattern of abuse in his own children. In the years after the divorce, Emma Cox Tate moved to Goshen, Indiana, where her home became the focus of the extended family. Okay, indeed, so they were told, this article was told by a friend of Emery's, that he reached the status of chess grandmaster, which actually he's an international master. It's not the same thing. The highest rank of a professional player. No. So this article's wrong, but that he lacked commitment and discipline. So let me pull up, well, I will just keep going, but he reached international master.
I gotta go to sleep, everyone. I gotta go to sleep. We will continue this, but I gotta go to sleep. Otherwise, I'm going to not be well rested for tomorrow. So, have a good night, everyone. Get some rest. Thank you in particular to EJ for helping me out with everything. Good night.